Tech Distinguished Lecture. Like most of you already know, ISTEC is the Information Science and Technology Center of Colorado State University. It's an organization that helps support research, teaching, and outreach activities of the university. Anything related to the use and development of software, computation, and similar activities. So it's my pleasure today to have Professor Indrajit Ray introduce our distinguished lecturer.
Thank you so much. So I'll start with a question for all of you. So how many of you have been a victim of ransomware? Anybody here? Oh, how many of you know about ransomware? Oh, all of you. Okay, all right. So so today we have a scientist with us who's very well-known researcher in the cybersecurity and cryptography area. One of his works actually led to the prediction of what is known as ransomware today. Okay, so it's a great honor for me today to introduce you to Dr. Moti Young. He's a computer scientist whose main research interests are in cryptography, security, and privacy. He's currently with Snap Incorporated. Dr. Young earned his PhD from Columbia University in 1988. He worked at IBM Research, was a vice president and chief scientist at CERT Co., was director of advanced authentication research at RSA Laboratories, and a research scientist with Google. He holds an adjunct faculty appointment at Columbia University, where he has co-advised several PhD students over the years. Two of his advisees has won the prestigious Gödel Prize in Theoretical Computer Science. Dr. Young's major interests are building strong, useful foundations in the field based on practical needs and reality of systems, and on the other hand, transforming theoretical ideas into practice. He has contributed extensively to numerous new cryptographic ideas, foundations, techniques, protocols, and systems, and to new central notions like encryption, signature, and protocols. One example is his innovating the notion of public key cryptosystems secure against chosen ciphertext attacks, which is currently a major requirement for public key encryption systems operating on the internet. He has also contributed to innovative security and privacy industrial constructions embedded in actual large-scale systems and networks. Examples of the latter are IBM's SNA network authentication, the Greek national lottery system, the security and privacy aspects of Google's global systems, such as the ad exchange, Google private ads attribution based on offline user activities, and Snapchat's cloud storage security. He also predicted innovations that were later adopted by businesses, like social-based authentication for account recovery. His interest in the subtlety of the notion of trusted systems has led to predicting what is now known as ransomware and predicting the crypto subversion attack vector. Dr. Young is a fellow of the ACM, IEEE, the International Association for Cryptographic Research, and the European Association for Theoretical Computer Science, and a recipient of the ACM's SIG-SAC Outstanding Innovation Award. With that, I would like to welcome Dr. Moti Young.
Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to visit here and to see so many people around, full room. I don't know, people are standing in the back. There are some chairs in the front, so you can approach the chairs. So today I'm going to tell you about a project in Google. It's already being used. And the title of my talk is "My Business is None of Your Business, Deploying Secure Computations," which is kind of specific technology for core business or just commercially. And I've done it in Google. It's been a long time coming project. It was working on it about 7 years. Okay, so secure computation. So what are secure computation protocols? So this is a notion in cryptographic research. It started in the late 70s, immediately after the notion of public key cryptography was developed. And it has many interesting and many basic fundamental ideas that are being in the research field, especially in theoretical cryptography for quite a while. And many researchers devoted their research career to this area. And in the last 5 years, people started to try to move it from theory to more experimental area, experimental security. They implemented system, they demonstrated, and so on. So let me show you the first 5 papers in the field and what they do, and this will give you a flavor of what you can do with secure computation. So the first paper that was the research is from 78. It's a tech report from 79. It's by Shamir, Rivest, and Adelman, the same people that invented RSA, and it's called mental poker. So the idea is like 2 or 3 users, they want to play poker by phone, and they want to draw the cards in a fair way so that nobody can cheat. It's very easy to cheat if you just play by phone. If you try to do it, trusting somebody, you can cheat. And in fact, information theoretically, the paper has this tech report has a proof that you cannot do it information theoretically, but with public key cryptography under certain assumptions about difficulty of hard problems, you can play mental poker. And then the second paper is by Goldwasser and Micali, probabilistic encryption and how to play mental poker, keeping secret all partial information. So that's also about mental poker, about this game and people keeping from each other the drawn cards from the deck and so on. And then there is a third paper by Michael Rabin, how to exchange secrets by oblivious transfer. So what is oblivious transfer? It's a special protocol by which I send you a bit, and you either get it or don't get it, let's say with probability 50%, and I don't know the result. So when I talk about oblivious transfer, let's say in Italy, they tell me, oh, the Italian post actually implements oblivious transfer, because when you send a physical mail in Italy, it either arrives or don't arrive. But that's it. So that's the game. I send you. It may arrive, may not. This is the game. You get it. I don't know the result. Then there is the paper from Manuel Blum, coin flipping by telephone. These people like to play telephone, or play with telephone. So it's like we have to flip a coin on the phone. The meta story is like a couple divorced, they don't want to see each other anymore, but they want to flip a coin, a fair coin, who gets the children, who gets the house. And they don't want to be cheated this way. And there is a protocol to do it. And then there is a protocol by Andy Yao, Protocols for Secure Computation, by which he proposed the millionaire problems. I guess these days it has to be called the billionaire's problem. It's like 2 billionaires want to know who is richer, but they don't want to disclose their wealth. So they run the protocol, and how outcome 1 bit who is richer. So all these kind of games. It looks like recreational, recreational mathematics. Yeah, it's like, why these people even worried to work about it? These people must be stupid, yes? They all got Turing Award. It's the highest award in computer science. So it's not so stupid. Okay? So in a sense, all these games break the symmetry of knowledge between the participants. In the poker game, I know what card I got, you don't. We play it, you know your cards, I don't. I know my cards, you don't. I flip a coin, I cannot influence the result. We put our wealth, we don't learn about it, but we learn the result. We just learn the predicate, who is richer, like the inequality. So these are interesting starting points, and I call them this like the opening five, like in a basketball game. They are the opening ones. And it started the field. So this field started about 40 years ago. And what's new about this field, what's interesting about this, is that traditional cryptography for thousands of years was about a channel between two people exchanging information, sending information, and an outsider, whom we like to call an adversary, cannot read this information. That's the goal of encryption. And that was the traditional role of cryptography. But with the new notion of secure computing, it's the insider. If A and B are the players, A is worried about B's state of knowledge, and B is worrying about A's state of knowledge. If A contributes input and B contributes input, they should not learn each other's input. There's no external entity that is not supposed to reading the message. It's internal. So it's more like, almost like privacy concern. I don't want you to know my input. And in all these games, the complexity theoretic assumptions about hardness of problems, that one guy can factor numbers, another guy cannot, one guy can have a public key, the other guy does not, this different state of knowledge enable to solve these problems that are otherwise provably impossible. We cannot flip a coin just by talking on the phone if we have equal power. Because some of us may know the coin before and may hang out. Because if he doesn't like the outcome, and if he likes, he stays on. So this is the gist of the impossibility of doing it, but that's the power of cryptography. So you look at a problem that information theoretically is not solvable. Intuitively, it doesn't look to be solvable. It doesn't make sense that people will talk to each other or the computer talk to each other. They are able to replace physical cards as we do in games, in card games. But it's possible. And then, in the last 40 years, a general theory behind this notion was developed. General secure computing for two parties, for multi-parties, was developed. And the general state here is that any function on inputs that is feasible, that has a representation that is polynomial time, or you can think about it as reasonably sized, is a circuit or is a Turing machine, and some input comes from one guy, another input comes from another guy, they can compute jointly and get the result. Like election, the voters vote and we compute the tally, for example. Or There are people bidding, and we compute the result. So you can do it for any function like this, any function, even randomized functions, computing over probability distribution, and really do it. And this was used in theory to develop a lot of notions like composability of protocols and different types of adversarial settings and so on. And for the specialized protocols like auctions, votings, and so on, there are even an area of special protocols that don't take the general purpose. You know, usually in computer science, something which is general purpose has some cost associated with it, that if you specialize it, it becomes more efficient. So election or payment or auctions are important protocols, and they have been optimized. Okay, so in recent years, people started to emphasize more the communication, the running times. They started to do demonstrations, and in the last few years, there are even 5 startups in the area, mainly in Europe, trying to do something useful with secure computing. There have been some demonstrations that this is possible. There is like open source systems like Helios that you can run elections with. Of course, we know all about Bitcoin, which can be viewed as some cryptographic protocol for secure computing, though it's a very specialized nature, and so on. Okay, but you know, all these are still just starting and good progress, but we needed to do something of real benefit, and Yogi Berra would have said there's no benefit unless it's beneficial. So I try to, for a number of years, to try to see how we can use it. And we need to understand beyond just the technology, beyond just the theory, even beyond just the demo, and when is actual business going to be ready for exploiting all these foundations? Yes, because especially as a research in industry, I'm very interested in, and I am in the development of foundations, of course, and ideas, but you want also to see it beneficial. So you need to cross the chasm of theory to practice. And to tell you the truth, around 2007, I started to get the idea that the era of secure computing as a practical tool in business is coming, and primarily because of internet economy. There is a implicit collaboration between different companies over the internet, which is happening. You know, the website that you see does not all come from one source, so there is some sharing and mixing. And of course, cloud, which was hosted environment, in which one guy contributes the data and it resides in another data, and so on. That was just the feeling. And I started asking cryptographers what would be considered deployment of secure computing technology in which you would say this is a success. Because just to know what people would consider, because it's been from the late 70s that nothing was done, and we were already in the late 2000s, so enough time. What do people think? So one cryptographer told me a business application which runs routinely for the sake of business would be a success. Another guy said, high impact business application. Don't ask me what high impact is, but it's something that you know when you see, but you cannot really define. But the most important reaction was the third cryptographer who told me the following. When I suggest such protocols in my company, I'm told no engineering team in the company will be able to implement it, so I conclude that this is only good theory. Too hard to spend time to commercialize it. Okay. So, just to give you a little bit the difference between this theory and practice, in the scientific flow of ideas is that we need to present a problem in a paper or in a set of papers or in a research project, argue the importance, the application, and so on. You need to solve the problem or relaxation thereof, which is relevant, and then argue how the solution has nice applications to what the goal is, and potentially other implications on a wider science. So this is the typical paper. If you read the scientific paper, and the way people demonstrate it is either by a model and a proof and a design, or by a demonstration if it's a system issue and measurement and so on. Doesn't matter the exact thing, but you have a problem, you claim a solution, and you argue why it is a solution, and you solve a problem. And in business is different. So I gave a similar talk somewhere, and I said, in business, once the theory, the experiment, and demo are done, together it solves about 10% of the deployment puzzle, because you have to worry about many things. Okay, the complexity just started once you have a solution, because you need to match it into the business needs, and the business needs are sometimes fuzzy, because the business need may be some departments need and not another department's need, and the politics of the business, and there's a big mess there. And when I said this, somebody from some other company, I was in Google at the time, and he came to me and said, oh, maybe in Google it's 10% of the problem, but when I am in this stage, it's only 1% of the problem. He said, first of all, I didn't want to insult the audience, and I didn't want to insult the audience that is sitting here, that all you do is the theory and the demo and so on, and it's only 1% of the problem. This is, without this 1% or 10% or whatever, nothing happens. So nobody should be insulted, but I didn't want to be too extreme, so too unbelievable. But the guy said, oh, maybe in Google it's 10%, but in my company, and I will not mention the name of the company, but it is the largest hardware company. Don't tell anyone. He told me, our engineers, it takes much more. But the main thing is, that you have the initial light bulb moment, you have an idea, it's not profitable. Business. You have an idea is not a prototype. A prototype is not a product. A product is not a business. A business is not a profit. So you have to tie all the things and put them together. So at least how to start with business. There need to be obvious incentives and clear benefits. And clear sometimes means you cannot come and say, okay, we'll do 1% better. There should be something more noticeable, because about 1% on and off, you can always argue. Second, the need of what you develop, in my case, crypto technology, may come from a completely different reason. You go into an engineering project, they don't know that they need crypto, they don't see the value, they want to solve some other problem. And you have to kind of reduce it to a problem that actually uses the technology. So you need awareness, knowledge of the business issues, the engineering issues, the product plans, the software development plans. And this usually is traditionally the role of the product manager and not the researcher. But you have to play this role to understand the business. And then you have to propose solutions. And proposing solutions is not something that you argue, that you prove a theorem or the demo works and shows so and so, but what actual problem you are solving. And when you do the cost benefit of your solution, it goes against the alternatives. Alternatives are very important. Nobody is going to, I mean, honestly, you can apply political muscles and push your solution, but that's not really the way to do it. This is driving to failure. So what is needed is to understand what is the opportunity in the overall product context, either as an enabler or as a preventer of disaster, especially if it's as a security technology. And all this implies that you really have to start with the problems and the issues of the business to begin with. So in theory, you start with the nice problems, you do the work, yada, 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 eventually you say, oh, a nice application. No. You have to start, here is the problem, here are the applications that I'm shooting in. And then drive and derive everything from there. Especially, you have to know that your own technology never lives in isolation. So for example, if we're talking about security of cryptography, you have to consider the other things, like the system function. Sometimes if you introduce security, you will hurt the actual functions or some of the functions of the system, or you will hurt performance. You will hurt usability or implementability or trust relations. And therefore we know that, for example, crypto is best applied when these conflicts are minimized. So if you do your web, if you go on the web and it actually uses HTTPS, you don't really care about the cryptography because you just see the green things and somebody told you to trust this better than the other, and you do it. And the success of HTTPS and TLS that underlines it is because there's no user involvement. Because if you needed, they have problems, but it's much better without it. And it's been driving e-commerce. But if you start to involve the end user or even the system administrator is too heavily in deploying some of your crypto, it's hard. If you have a systems function that calls for certain data operations, like let's say database, relational database, and you start putting cryptography on top of it, and it contradicts the function, it creates problems. There are tensions there. So you have to be mindful of this. So back to crypto. So if I look at the development of modern cryptography, I see symmetric cryptography that was developed in the early 70s. And the main driver there was that banks became branched out into branches. And and they needed secure communication in the between the branches and a few players, a few branches, and they needed some cryptography, and that's what NIST was driving the DES, the data encryption standard, where they started to take symmetric cryptography. Symmetric cryptography, when the key is shared between the sender and recipient. The public key cryptography started in 76 and 77, and the main driver for its success were originally distributed systems by companies like Digital Equipment Corporation, but the main driver later on was the internet. So suddenly you want to communicate with servers, you don't know who are the servers, and then you need this to establish secure authenticated channels with these servers. And then secure computation, I call it the third crypto technology of modern cryptography, 78, 79, and nothing was driving it to business. And the use of the first two generations was obvious because there's no alternative to communicating in a computer network securely. There's almost no alternative without encrypting the communication, or secure storage has the same motivation. Banks became distributed, and of course the internet became distributed, and you could not even have agreement with the servers that you are talking to because of scale. So they had to get the certificate for their key from some certificate authority that you have to trust, and suddenly you can operate on a bigger infrastructure. And the mobile ecosystem also relies on that. Okay, you cannot have pigeon post replacing it because it's electronic. So our alternative analysis said, you have to use it, and obviously they are in use. The third generation, so as I told you, I joined Google, and I had the feeling now it's the time, collaborative business, cloud platforms later on, and so on. So it must be needed somewhere. But how to do it, and what to do it, and where to put it first. It's very important. It's very important when you deploy new technology. And now there's a new group in Google of crypto in New York, and they have to do something. Your first step has to be a success, demonstrating value to the business, and that's a phenomenon in software development. I call it the foot at the door principle. If you don't put a foot at the door and show that you are useful, you will never enter the room. So the first step is important. So when, how to do it was, even though I was feeling it's going to be the time, I had to choose carefully where is going to be the first place to employ it. And now I'm going to go to this first place. I call it the private data exchange, which is the first application. Google actually announced it last June. It's been working in experiments about 2 years, and in the field at least since June. I don't know exactly since when, but it's working. And why is this exchange? Because data exchange, because it's needed, and Peter Drucker is like the father of innovation. Some people consider him the father of modern management. And he identified 7 fruitful sources for great ideas that are going to work in business, and I saw in this technology some of them. Of course, the technology is unexpected because what crypto can do was totally unexpected, and industry and market structures we're getting to get used to it, and the constraints of the demographies, the privacy constraints of collaboration, so the process, and this is driven either by regulation and business needs to do this collaborating, but this collaborative work, but you cannot really do it. So I identified traces of these sources of ideas, and I said I don't want to say it's a great idea, but here it's a very good idea to try to implement it in data exchanges between businesses, because they need to collaborate. They will need to use this secure computing crypto that nobody is using because it's an unexpected use, and it will solve a problem that has some of the traces of these sources. So you really have to ask yourself, where should I deploy it? And in the context of a big company, a big operating company that have many alternatives to achieve anything, and more smart people that it can contain, whatever that means, and you have to suggest something. So you need to constrain yourself. So the first thing I suggested to myself, the first application should be offline computation. It is critical to the company. It cannot be online computation, because online computation has a lot of response time. You know, if I suggested to put secure computation over Google search, and the user experience would be that you send a search query to Google and you wait 1 week for the answer, it would not be so great, yes? I don't think it would be, it would not pass the demo stage. So offline, so you neutralize a lot of the other constraints of the performance and function and so on. It has to involve data from different companies, because collaboration is going to drive it, where you really have to hide something, and maybe hiding something from the if it is only an issue of end users, it may be maybe other alternatives will apply. But if it's other company involved, you know, company to company, there are certain rules and certain regulations, and there must be privacy and sharing restrictions, and all alternatives have to be bad from regulation or from technology or from development or from all other aspects. And the impact has to be clear. It has to be central to the business. So I'll talk about this. So here is the system. So there is content provider, which is G, stands for Google, now that they announced. Before it was just G. And it has a list of users who view the content. Now I can say the content is advertisement campaign. People go as users and they click on an ad. You have your phone, you see an ad, you look at it, you serve it, okay. And then there is a transaction provider or a merchant, M, where users go and consume. So let's say people here, there is a campaign advertisement for Walmart. So there are, people read Walmart mobile advertisement on their phone. And then Walmart or the credit card companies on behalf of Walmart have the list of people who actually spend money and bought things in Walmart, either online or offline, and so on. And the goal is to discover the spend value for the set of users of G per merchant, per M, to assess the correlation of viewing versus spending. So what's important is how many people who actually saw the ad went and actually bought and how much they spent on the average. And these are indications of the success of the ad campaign. The lift of the campaign, it's called in advertisement engineering. So we want to compute total spend, number of spend, and maybe leak some upper bound on the user's list side because these sizes are known. And so this is the private data exchange between the transaction provider, like credit card companies on behalf of merchants, and Google. So how do we do it if we don't have any privacy constraints? That's very easy. G here has the set of IDs. M has the set of IDs. And for each ID, the spending. And now assume they have the same ID. The credit card company knows your Gmail address, and Google knows your Gmail address. So that's your ID, or the phone number, or your address. Something serves as a common ID. So the IDs are drawn from the same common set. And then here is how to solve it without privacy. M just send the list of users and their spend. M1 spends S1, M2 spends S2. What G does, it just does take this set and this set, do set intersection. You know, for example, one way to do it is sort and do merge sort, and then you get the intersection. And then you get exactly the MI, which is also in GI, and then take their sums and sum it. It's a very simple way. But of course, the set intersection gives too much. It reveals to G all the users of M, not just those in the intersection, and all their spending. Because here M just sends everything. And we are talking banks and financial institutes and credit card companies. They cannot send MI. They cannot send any MI, and definitely they cannot send any transactional information. So the goal is to find the sum of spend values, common IDs, and just the number of common IDs, not learn IDs. So what we want to do is M finds nothing about the IDs, about the sum of spending, so we neutralize this. And G finds only aggregate value, the size of the set of the intersection and the total spend value. And remember, we are dealing with entities that have cryptographers and lawyers and regulation experts and and yada yada and management, and everybody is worrying about their thing. And Google has this and this and this, and people that are worrying about reputation. And you have to sell them a solution. And it has to be vouched for by technology, by legal, by PR, by regulation. You know, business is complicated. Okay, so let's drive towards the solution. So the first solution is the blind sum protocol. And here we will use homomorphic encryption that is only additive homomorphic encryption. So instead of M sending the spend value he send an encryption of the spent value, and this encryption has a very interesting property. And the property is that if I take encryption of one element and encryption of the second element, and I multiply the encryption, I generate the encryption of the sum of the element. So I can do aggregation, linear aggregation of sum under the encryption. It's like you put a value in a box, you put another value in a box, I hit the two boxes and I generate a third box that has the sum of the two elements in it. Okay? So you send me these boxes, this encryption of sum 1, encryption of sum 2. I do the intersection. I find out the right group, here, elements that are in the intersection. I learn the intersection. So far, I let G see the identities, but I don't want to give him the sum. And now I can multiply all these values together. And the one who can help me in recovering the sum is M, who owns the public key of this homomorphic encryption. But I don't want M to know the sum. It's only for G. So I encrypt it with a random number. So effectively, I randomize the sum. M can decrypt this E and send me back the value, which is S, which is this random value plus the real sum. So M learns nothing. He learns some random number. You can use very big R, which swallows all the small s's. But when it gets back to G, G chose R. So I can do subtraction and get the sum. Okay? So one side get the sum, the other guy get nothing. Just help me to recover the sum. I call it blind sum. Okay. The problem, we still see the identities coming from the merchant, which we don't want. So if we had the following functionality, M sending this list of MI and the encryption span, and G send the GI, this can find the intersection for us, send G the corresponding encryptions, and then we can run the blind sum. So now G does not learn the identity, because we have this trusted guy that does the set intersection for us. And now we solve the problem. But who is going to, this trusted guy, that's the problem. Because these lawyers and managers and this, they don't trust anyone. So how can you find a trusted guy? So we have to implement it. So we have to do privacy preserving intersection as part of the process. And for this, we use an idea that is called commutative encryption. F and G are commutative if F of G of the input equals G of F of the input. So F of G of M is equals G of F of M. And we will use this. First of all, it exists. Actually, it predated public key. There was a protocol by Polig and Hellman. Hellman is the same Hellman from Diffie-Hellman. And they suggested a symmetric encryption function. You take the message and you exponentiate it in a prime field. Actually, we are doing it over elliptic curve, but doesn't matter. They called it exponentiation cipher. In 1980, we are going prehistory of cryptography. Shamir noticed that there is a commutativity here. That, because if it's exponentiation, m of e1 raised to e2 is the same as m of e2 to the e1. mod P. It works in any field. This commutativity works in any field. So we can use it, and actually we don't use it for encryption. We kind of will use it to take the message and raise it to one exponent and then to the other, or to raise it to the second exponent and then to the first, and see that they match. So we actually use it as a commutative joint hash. But I knew I'm going to be in Colorado, so joint hash was an implicit message with the okay? So, you know, for people who are in cryptography, we can actually show that over DDH group, blah, 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 late 90s idea, this is actually, if the messages are secure, this joint hash will be secure, and it will not learn the original message. But here is the set, how do we do the set intersection? So G will raise its list in a random order with the function G, which is exponentiating with its exponent. Each run it will be a new exponent. M will take his function F and will go over his list, will randomize it, randomize the order, and randomize the order of this list and apply his own function F to it. So what gets back to G is doubly encrypted his original list and singly encrypted M's list. Then he can take the second list, apply G to it, and take its own list and do set intersection, just as before, but not on the clear text, but on the doubly encrypted text, and finds equality. So it finds the exact intersection because this was in random order, and this F is a very, very strong encryption. G does not know who is who because his list was completely randomized, the other list is also randomized. He only knows this tag in my list is in the intersection, and he can count how many there are. By the way, if we didn't put in random order here, if I took G's list and did not randomize it, then G would have known the identities of the people in the intersection. And that's good to have because there may be applications in which you know this, and we can kill two birds in one protocol. Okay? So here is the protocol put together. You first run find the common indicators. When you have the common indicators, since now when I send my encrypted MI, I also send the spend value encrypted for the blinded sum, G can do the intersection, picks the elements from the sum, multiply them, add the randomizer, and complete the random sum. So eventually what I get is the two companies now only learn how many are in common and what's the spend value. Actually, not the two companies. G, Google learns. And this is very important for the ads business to run. And therefore, it's run and run and run because this is the juice. This is what brings the money. And otherwise, there's no way to take advertisement that runs on your mobile phone and you're spending in a restaurant. And this is the way to go offline. And Google announced it, and they say now, so they announce it in the wrong way. They say, now we can follow users to offline transactions and count them. And the second sentence, oh, but we do it without, only on aggregates, and but the journalists didn't want to listen already to the second sentence because they had the juicy headline bashing Google because you make more money, you sell more newspapers this way. Okay, so of course this is the basic solution, and they are talking with the engineers, there are more solutions and so on. The homomorphic encryption is called PAIE encryption. And we added more solutions, and the status is that it was announced and it's operational, and people working more and more and more applications. Okay, so let me do a little bit of summation. To move, summing up the talk, move from theory to business, we need to see the overall continuum from the theory, what the theory enables us, because these are theoretical things, and you also have to have the history of the theory. You have to know old stuff that people forgot sometimes, because this is going to solve your problem. You have to know the full continuum thematically and historically, and theory and practice have to go together. Leonardo da Vinci said, one who loves, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, one who loves practice without theory should mount a ship without a compass, because that was the navigation tool of the time. And he also said, theory without practice will die. So both sides of the aisle need each other. It's not a political commentary. The politics is lost. Okay, and the idea is this technology was almost 40 years and was not used, and now it's used heavily for a very crucial business where there is no other alternative. And it's very hard. It means don't judge a technology immediately. Sometimes you need, if a technology is good, it will find its way. And what I can say from my experience is, in crypto and engineering, in general projects, there's no fixed recipe, just general principles, but you have to follow the principles. I mentioned some principles. Business adaptation is very challenging. What we need is the right interpretation of the theory. Don't just follow what you learn in school. You have other things to learn. The other side, the engineering, the business, and legal sometimes. A tax model, risk management, incentives apply, liabilities apply. Secure component, proof of security theory still matter. And the aesthetic is different than in theory, because I told you a theory paper does solution and so on, but I think solving very real critical valuable issue based on large field of study and making it robust, navigating all the mess that are involved in business, eventually it's a definition of aesthetics. You take something very ugly situation, and you solve it. And let me just finish with a comment on this point of view, on the aesthetics of business applications versus theory. So the elegance of theory, you can capture it by what Polya said. This is the mathematical philosopher of the previous century. He was a Stanford math professor, and he said, the elegance of a mathematical theorem is directly proportional to the number of independent ideas one can see in the theorem, and inversely proportional to the effort it takes to see them. So if you can combine good ideas, you're great and it's very elegant. But if it takes you a lot of cumbersome navigation to see it, it doesn't like it. Very nice quantification of math elegance. I confronted with what Boltzmann said. Boltzmann is a very interesting and tragic character in the history of science and in his personal life. But he said something very nice. And there are many Boltzmann prizes and many recognitions for his work. But I think he said something nice. If you are to describe the truth, and I think business is the real world, is the truth, leave elegance to the tailor. Don't worry about it. Who cares? Technical problem solving, when it's messy real life situation, who cares about the definitions of actual elegance? It's elegant by itself just to be able to solve it. And that's my philosophy. So I hope I told you something today, and thank you very much.
we have just time for maybe 1 or 2 questions.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. This was a very interesting talk, and I particularly appreciated the technology or theory transfer to practice, since I'm in industry myself. I did want to make one other observation, though, as to what might have contributed to how long it took for this particular one to arrive in practice, and that is the name that seems to have been given to it. I'm in the field of security, and when I saw secure computing, I had a heck of a time figuring out what it meant, because the term secure means there are many, many different security properties. And so secure computing could mean any number of different things. And
but when I see artificial intelligence, it says nothing to me. It as well. But it's been up and down since the early 80s.
It's had a challenge too, right? I mean, it's taken decades as well. But I was looking up the term to see other terms that were being used for it, and one of them was privacy-preserving computing. And that one seems a little bit more specific, and my premise is that if the term is self-describing in a way that the non-theoreticians, the practical folks in industry can understand what it provides, there might be a faster path to getting it to technology adoption, because they might see the value of it directly rather than not being able to tell.
I agree.
Just a thought.
I agree.
Maybe just one last question.
Hi, Professor. So the way I'm thinking about it is, okay, let's say we have a theoretical algorithm, and we want to port it to...
We have what?
We have a theoretical algorithm which satisfies some requirements. Now we want to put it to a particular system. Is there a way to know whether this algorithm will suit this system before actually implementing it?
No, you don't put a theory into system. That's the demo. That's the demo stage. That's the feasibility. So you do take theory into practice for your own to make sure that you are not selling a pie in the sky. You do this stage, but to really transform it to business, it's much beyond that, beyond the demo. You have to understand the business, you have to understand the problems of the business, you have to, you know, it's very hard, and in the sense that there's no training for it. I mean, it's like very hard in school to learn debugging, because there's no bagging. They just pop up. So there's no way to exactly learn this method for your specific problem, but there are certain principles, as I said, and you have to apply them, and you have to do the legwork. Without it, no way. If I didn't talk with the right engineers, if I didn't talk with the first group that adopted it, but they failed, and then I had to talk to the second group and make a little bit noise that it's known, and work on other things and get the reputation that I know how to solve problems. Otherwise, that group that eventually adopted it, which is the ads group, which is the main group, which put anyway their best engineers on these problems, on how to attribute in the offline world to the ad, because they knew it's a hard problem, would never have been doing it if I was not trying and making errors. Trial and error, you know, it's part of it. Part of it, you have to be there. And, you know, specifically, situation may change here and there. Something sometimes in industry by luck, somebody tells you to do the right thing, or the CEO is blessing it from the start. But, you know, these things are rare. But definitely you have to do the demo. Definitely you have to do the feasibility. But you have to learn the business side independently of your solution, whatever is needed. Be open-minded about it. Be open-minded about it. And then, if you see the matching, or if you see mismatching, but you can correct your technology, that's the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In appreciation of your presenting the distinguished lecture, Science and Technology Center Distinguished Lecturer.
Thank you very much.